It's just going to be kind of a rant concerning what I believe the Jesuit order is going to do in 2017. Now we need to know that the Jesuit order the Society of Jesus, the New Knights Templars, the military company of the Society of Jesus, composed of soldiers, commanded by a military general called the Jesuit Superior General, that it is an international brotherhood of soldiers, and they have essentially a threefold purpose. You need to get my book, Vatican Assassins, Wounded in the House of My Friends. Get the ebook. I don't have the book anymore. I need to save some money to be able to publish another 30 of them. But in the meantime, you can still get the ebook. You can download it on the website. You need to have it on your Kindle, and you can read it. Make it portable. You know, I never really wanted to make a book anyway, but for the World War II guys that were losing their sight, I made it a big book so that they could see the pictures and 13 fonts, 13 points in the writing there. So it's big letters. But just get it on your Kindle and read it. And therein I show you the 3-point design of the Jesuit order. The first one is the Jesuit order seeks to destroy the Protestant Reformation. What does this concern? Why the concern over that? Because, my friend, without the Protestant Reformation, you don't have shoes on your feet. You don't have a shirt to wear. You don't have a pair of pants to wear. All of these things being made by a manufacturing base. Without the Protestant Reformation, you do not have what's called the textile industry. And these gorgeous machines that we no longer have to have a little spinning wheel and make ourselves a sweater or whatever. We have these wonderful, fantastic machines that can make fabrics and then can actually sew these things together. The pants, the shirts, or whatever, so we can be the well-dressed peoples of Western civilization that we were. All of this wonderful high textile industry was born out of freedom of conscience so men could invent machines that would do this. You see? This is why you infidels and God haters and Bible rejectors, at least for practicality's sake, need to want to preserve the Reformation. Because you atheists and infidels never produced anything. You never produced a free culture, ever. And I know because I was one of you at one time. We go on here and we see the Jesuit order wants to destroy the Protestant Reformation. Why do you think the Jesuits have inculcated such a hatred for the Reformation in the hearts of those poor, deluded Irishmen, of which I am ethnically one half Irish? My grandfather Callahan was a full-blooded Irishman. Grandfather Phelps was at least half Irish. Same way with Grandma Phelps. She was a lot Irish and English, but I'm half Irish. The blessing that has come to the Irish people is because they got the Bible in their hands. We were known as the Scotch Irish. The Scotch Irish settled major cities in America. We became the greatest generals of the American military, the Scotch Irish. Winfield Scott, Stonewall Jackson, Robert E. Lee, McClellan, George McClellan. All these generals were Scotch-Irishmen. And why were the Scotch-Irish so exalted and extolled? Because we were reading the Bible. So the Jesuits have to destroy the Reformation. That's why they can never say any positive thing about Oliver Cromwell. That's why they call it the so-called Reformation. That's why the Jesuits, as they run Hollywood with certain of their notorious token Jews, constantly denigrate, despise, and hold up to absolute infamy the Protestant Reformation. The Jesuits called Martin Luther a pig. They hated Calvin. They outlawed the works of Luther, Calvin, and others. And anybody that was found with the works of these obstinate heretics was murdered. The Jesuit answer to the Reformed preaching of the gospel, saved by grace through faith plus nothing, is to kill those who preach it using the arm of the government. That's called Jesuitism. This is what King George was doing to Baptists and Presbyterians in the colonies at the time of the Revolution, whipping us and killing us and seeking to drive us all back into the Anglican Church, at which time the Jesuits ran the Archbishop of Canterbury, as well as King George III. The political doctrine of the Jesuit order is to kill heretics and liberals, which includes liberal Roman Catholics. That's why they poisoned the great king of Italy, Victor Emmanuel II. They poisoned him, a Roman Catholic king of Italy, who told the Pope, Pius IX, "You have spiritual power, but I have all temporal power, political power." And for that, the Jesuits killed him and most of his family. Killed his son, Umberto, in 1900. Any Roman Catholic, dictator or president or military man or king, any one of them that resists the political power of the Jesuits will be removed by scandal or murder. They'll be removed by murder, with murder like Roman Catholic John F. Kennedy, or be removed with scandal by way of Papa Doc Duvalier in Haiti. And the list goes on and on. This is Jesuit politics. And this is something the left-wing socialist communist press and its pimps and whores, as well as the right-wing socialist fascist press and its pimps and whores, won't ever touch with a 10-foot pole. Bill O'Reilly will never tell you about the Jesuit design in killing Lincoln or killing Kennedy. Never. Because he's a good Irish Roman Catholic, loyal to the Pope of Rome, just like Lawrence O'Donnell, another Irish Roman Catholic, loyal to the Pope of Rome. And Chris Matthews, another Irish Roman Catholic, loyal to the Pope of Rome. That's why Chris Matthews, the Irish Roman Catholic, and Bill O'Reilly, the Irish Roman Catholic, are there at the Archbishop of New York City's Al Smith dinner, having a ball, being important. Like their opinion matters. They're not going to tell you. They're never going to expose the Jesuit power in this country to you. That's why those of you who enjoyed this broadcast need to support it financially, because we live from month to month here. We're not Rupert Murdoch around here with billions and billions and members of the equestrian order. So, in continuing the purpose of the Jesuit order, they about destroyed the Reformation in the 20th century. What did they do? What did they have to deal with at the turn of the 20th century? Well, the Jesuits had been expelled again from Europe for the most part. In the 1800s and 1820, the Jesuits had been expelled from Russia by the great Alexander I, who had repented of his murder of his father, Paul I, and had believed the gospel that Christ died for his sins, was buried, and rose again. And Alexander I allowed the free circulation of the Bible in Russia. And because the Jesuits were against that, he kicked them out in 1820. Russian men, you should have a picture of Alexander I in your office, in your home, because he brought the Reformation Bible into Russia on a grand scale, and he allowed freedom of conscience, and he also threw out the Jesuits. Well, in 1823 or thereabouts, 22, 23, the Tsar realized that it was not just the Jesuits, but the Masonic Lodge. So Tsar Alexander I shut down every Masonic Lodge in Russia in 1822. Yep. So now the Jesuits are expelled from all the Russias. Masonic lodges are closed. The Bible's freely circulating in Russia. And Alexander dies suddenly of apoplexy. Apoplexy means poisoned. And so the Jesuits will remain expelled from Russia for over 100 years. They will be expelled from Russia from 1820 to 1922, when Vladimir Lenin and his real backer, Joseph Stalin, will readmit the Jesuits into Russia in 1922. You can read all about it in a book titled Descent into Darkness by a priest named James Zatko, who was a professor at Notre Dame. Get the book, Descent into Darkness by James Zatko. Z-A-T-C-O, I believe, or K-O. So the Jesuits had to give back Russia. They will do this in the 20th century. In 1871, after the Jesuits had fomented the Franco-Prussian War, and you can read about this in the 9th edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica under Jesuits. That edition of Encyclopedia Britannica is still on the index of forbidden books of the Holy Office of the Inquisition, renamed in 1917 the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, something like that. So when Germany, Protestant Germany, trounced France in a 6-month war, and Napoleon III fled for refuge to Great Britain to be protected by that English prostitute, Victoria, busy also working for the Jesuits secretly. If she wasn't, she wouldn't have protected Napoleon III. Right? She said, "Don't you come into my Great Britain, where we're a bulwark against the Counter-Reformation. We keep the Jesuits out." She should have said something like that. But oh no, "Come on in, Napoleon III. Oh, come in, my little son." And France then was given terms at Versailles And the one who oversaw that was the great Otto von Bismarck, the great Lutheran, the chancellor of Kaiser Wilhelm I, the Protestant Lutheran. Kaiser Wilhelm was a Protestant Lutheran. Bismarck was a Protestant Lutheran who said that no pope could be saved. He said a Catholic or a priest could be saved, but no pope could be saved. Bismarck knew all about being saved. Bismarck also said that Karl Marx was tutored by the Jesuit superior general Peter Becks in the British Museum. That's why the German Protestants kicked Marx out of Germany. That Masonic Jew working for the Jesuits. And you can read about Marx's relation to the Jesuits in a book by Richard Wurmbrand called Marx and Satan. So we have Germany now in 1872, 1 year after the treaty ending the Franco-Prussian War, that the Reichstag, with the aid of Kaiser Wilhelm I and Bismarck, and even the Catholics of Germany, kick the Jesuits out of all of Germany and Prussia in 1872. You can read about this in Theodore Greisinger's great work on the Jesuits. History of the Jesuits is told to the German people. That's why I have Brother Nico on this radio station, that he can tell this history of the Jesuits to the German people, the beloved German Saxon people who broke the temporal power of the Pope. So the Jesuits say, now we got a problem with Germany. Germany's kicked us out. Russia's kicked us out. Who else has kicked us out? Well, France is going to kick them out. You got Gambetta, the Prime Minister of France, Leon Gambetta, who expels the Jesuits from the glorious nation of France in 1880. Now the French have kicked the Jesuits out. The very country in which the Society of Jesus was founded, they're kicked out of France. They were founded in Paris in 1534. So now France has kicked the Jesuits out, 1880. Germany's kicked the Jesuits out, 1872. Russia's kicked the Jesuits out, 1820. The Netherlands have kicked the Jesuits out, 1848. The Swiss kicked the Jesuits out in 1848, 1849. China had kicked the Jesuits out in 1774, readmitted in 1842. The Jesuits have a score to settle with the Chinese then. Japan had kicked the Jesuits out by no later than 1639 and forcefully readmitted in Japan in 1865, thereabouts. Emperor Meiji lifting the Christian ban, which Emperor Komi refused to do. So he was murdered at the age of 36. So the Jesuits, with their being expelled from the Far East, they're being expelled from Guatemala. They were expelled from Guatemala 1884. They're expelled from Mexico in 1872, 1873, poisoning Benito Juarez at his desk. In 1872, the year after, the Jesuits were expelled out of Mexico. So the Jesuits are beginning to be expelled once again from all the advanced nations, the Protestant nations. Ethiopia had expelled the Jesuits in 1683. They remained expelled for centuries. So we got to get the Ethiopians, got to get them niggas. That's right. Got to get them Ethiopians. How dare they expel us? So you have all these nations on the hit list. And you couple that with the sin of the Jesuits in their Back to Africa, Scramble for Africa from 1885 to 1915 for 30 years. And so now we have a reason to have a huge world war to punish the nations involved in that grand theft. The white nations involved in that grand theft of the black nations of Africa. By the way, Back to Africa didn't extend to Ethiopia either. The African, Scramble for Africa didn't extend to Ethiopia, as I covered previously. But the Jesuits say, well, you know, what we need is a nice big war. And you can read about this in the offing in a book titled The Popes, the Kings, and the People, written in 1903. And I quote it in my book, Vatican Assassins. And it goes along these lines. What if the Jesuit order should orchestrate a huge international war of nations? Theodore Geisinger wrote in his great work on the Jesuits, the history of the Jesuits told to the German people, he said, concerning Vatican I and the infallibility of the Pope that was set forth then, he said, what are we going to have? Is the Kaiser the sovereign or is the Pope? He said, will this not lead to a second 30 years war? And the moment I read that, I said, my God, that's exactly what the Jesuits did. And so they would incite the second 30 years war. Remember, the first 30 years war was for the purpose of destroying the Reformation out of Germany and Eastern Europe, including Poland, Hungary, Northern Germany. And they nearly did in Germany, except it was for the great Swedish king at the time, who, when he landed with his troops to save the Reformation, got on his knees before all of his tens of thousands of troops and asked the Lord's blessing. Gustavus Adolphus. All you Swedes need a picture of Gustavus Adolphus I in your house. That's why Sweden became a great nation, which now Sweden's being destroyed by the blacks and the Arab Muslims that the Jesuits have deliberately brought into Sweden to bastardize the white Swedish race, to destroy the history of the Reformation there, and to ultimately bring in right-wing fascism, as is the secret intent of the Jesuits all across Europe. So the first purpose of the Jesuits is to destroy the Reformation, which they have pretty much done, and they did it with their second 30 Years' War. What happens in World War I? Why, the Germans are defeated, and the Protestant Second Reich is broken up thanks to the treason of Kaiser Wilhelm II. What happens to the Romanov dynasty? Remember, the Romanovs were the protectors of the Eastern Orthodox Church that was, at least in theology, against the Pope of Rome. So we will now get rid of the Romanov dynasty, and we will kill over 5,000 priests and nuns of the Orthodox Church. And we will then impose communism in Russia, and we will have our Jesuit NKVD, Cheka, round up hundreds of thousands of people, shoot them in the back of the head in Lubyanka, and put them in mass graves, as they would do to the Polish manhood of Poland during Katyn massacre of 1941, 39, 40, 41. So we're going to take back Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution. We're going to take back Germany with World War I. And then we're going to decimate German manhood with World War II. And after World War II, the end of the Second 30 Years' War, Germany will be completely humbled. We will occupy Germany with black American soldiers, black English soldiers, black French soldiers, and make sure we can bastardize and mulattoize and mongrelize as many of the German Saxon people so they'll never rise up and resist us again. That's right. That's why they put Germany under that for 45 years, 1945 to 1990, and it's still under it for the most part. So they conquered the Protestant Second Reich. They conquered the Orthodox Church protected by the Romanovs. And they destroyed the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire, for the most part, would not go along with the papacy. So they used the caliph and the last emperor, the last sultan of the Ottoman Empire, to go along with World War I and lose his entire empire. So the Jesuits then can recreate their Latin kingdom of Jerusalem using their most faithful servant, the British king and parliament. Because the British then would also lose their British Empire in World War I. They would lose 500 ships to German U-boats. The Jesuits inciting English Protestants to kill German Protestants. English against German. White people killing white people. Protestants killing Protestants. Destroying a Protestant British Empire and a Protestant Prussian Reich. This is what the Jesuits did in the Second 30 Years' War. They got back Russia. They got back Germany. They got the British Empire completely in their hands. And they did it through the Anglo-American international wide power structure. They got back France after they shed rivers of blood of the Frenchmen during World War I and World War II. France will never expel the Jesuits again. It's called payback. It's called Jesuit payback. And in light of that, let's just check out what I believe they're going to do in the 20th century. Moving on with what I believe, in light of my historically researched guess, what the Jesuits intend to do during this 21st century. Well, they've gotten back China with the Communist Revolution in 1949, overseen by Francis Cardinal Spellman in control of the State Department at the time. And they put Brother Freemason Mao in power so he could be an absolute dictator in the destruction of the Chinese churches, the true New Testament Chinese churches, and the Chinese middle class. So when you destroy the church, you also got to destroy the middle class. Because the middle class is generally Christian people that worked and obeyed the word of God, and God prospered them. So that brought about a middle class. Can't have that now. Then we got Russia with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917, thanks to financing by Washington and help from Warren G. Harding, a quadroon. He was 1/4 black. He was America's first black president. Warren G. Harding. That's right. And yet he did some very good things. He called for protective tariffs. He wasn't going to go along with the League of Nations. Warren G. Harding did some very good things, for which reason he was poisoned by the Jesuits in San Francisco. He's one of the 14 American presidents that's been murdered by the Jesuit order. So they got Russia and began to build it and finance it, and continued the killing off of the anti-papal Orthodox priests and nuns and the Orthodox political leaders. So they got Russia. And if Russia would have a problem feeding its people, why, they'd use the American military government to use the American farmers to send grain over for free to Russia there to keep them well fed. Do you see how the military government here has built Russia? Socialist, communist USSR? No, it's not the Russian Federation. It's the USSR. Nothing's changed. That government has never been the friend of the Russian people. It's never been the friend of the American people. But I'll tell you, the military government in Washington is the friend of the military government in Moscow, because both intelligence communities work together under Jesuit oversight and control from Gregorian University in Rome. Vladimir Putin just in July, 6 months ago, signed a law into effect that there's going to be no more private reading of the Bible in Russia. No more house churches in Russia. That's what that filthy scumball did. Working for the Jesuits, pimping for the Pope. And he's supposed to be portrayed as some kind of wonderful leader for Russia. What's wrong with you American people? You're that dumb? Do you really not know history at all? What have you been doing? Oh, I forgot. You've been watching, what, the Addams Family or something like that, huh? Guess that's not on anymore. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That's what you've been watching. So now, what the Jesuits had lost in the 19th century, they got back in the 20th century. They perfected it during the Cold War. And now in going into the 21st century, they've created a new enemy for the American people. And that new enemy is Islam, particularly Shia Islam. Because after all, it's the Iranians that are so terrible. And what's Iran? It's entirely Shia Islam. There's not one Sunni mosque in all of Iran. The Shia are not allowed to make trips to Mecca or Medina. They are regarded as infidels and heretics by the Sunnis. And so what's been done is a crusade has been ignited against Islam. They call it radical Islam. There's no such thing as radical Islam. Islam is radical, but it's not as radical as Romanism, because Islam is the creation of Rome. Sunni Islam, not Shia. Shia was not created by Rome, but the Sunnis were. So what happens is now is that a war, a crusade has been incited. I call it the 12th Crusade, by the Pope and his Jesuits working through the Archbishop of New York City and the Jesuits running Fordham University in the Bronx, overseeing the Archbishop, and the Jesuits running Washington, overseeing Washington with the Jesuit Georgetown University. And they've incited a huge crusade. So what's the purpose of this crusade? Well, I maintain that Russia has been deliberately built by the West, by this military government in Washington under all administrations, Republican and Democrat. Yeah, Van Jones, you savage black socialist communist for MSNBC. It is all messed up, but you'll never tell it this story, will you, Van Jones? You're racist and you're bigot. Hating white men. That's right. That's the shibboleth for the left. You got to hate white people, okay? Especially white men, especially white alpha males, because they want to beat them down on the ground. And don't ever let them be an alpha male. Oh, no! Can't let that animal come to existence. Got to beat them down, man. Beat them down. Because alpha white males that read the Bible and own guns and have nationalistic leaders defeat the papacy when we war on them. So we're going to use Russia now that we've beaten Russia down. There's no real Bible witness there in Russia except the churches underground. We're going to use Russia, and we're going to build Russia as we have built them during the Cold War using American technology. We're going to build them into a fighting military force with Spetsnaz and a few other things. By the way, did you know American Navy SEALs train Spetsnaz? Spetsnaz? Did you know that? I know a SEAL who did. He told me so. The military government in Washington is sending our best, most highly trained soldiers to teach Russian Spetsnaz soldiers for our invasion. Yep. So they're building Russia. And they'll continue to build Russia. Maybe they built Russia to the place that they want them. They built China. They're building a navy, a large navy, an air force for China. That's why they have taken our manufacturing base and moved it to China. Who did that? Men like Knight of Malta, Lee Iacocca, and these other wicked sinners, papal knights working for the Vatican to move out our heavy industry here, so we American men cannot wage war. So we have this stupid little thing called just in time, where we have no parts in storage. So they're continually beating down our manufacturing base while building Russia's war machine. This is going to continue. And I tell you this, if Donald Trump seriously brings back American manufacturers or attempts to do it, he's going to be Kennedy'd. The manufacturing base, friends, is gone. And you can thank the Republicans and the Democrats for it, because they both work together for the Archbishop of New York City. So they built Russia. You've got a highly trained military there, and those Russian men, they know how to fight. They like it. They've been beaten down and treated so terribly for 100 years since the Crimean War of, 1856 or so. They've been beaten down, mass murdered, mass slaughtered, betrayed. They were known as the Russian Horde when they came over into Germany, from Hungary, Austria, gang raping every woman they could find. I mean, these guys are savages. You turn them loose on a population, man, it's trouble. That's why they want to take our guns from us, so we can't shoot them when they come over here. That's why the military government has been after our guns for decades. Not just Obama and his white massa, the white Roman Catholic Joe Biden. They want us disarmed, so we're like the poor German people that can't shoot those Syrians and Muslims in their country when they're raping their women. You can't just take them out and shoot them like they ought to be done. The cops aren't going to do it. They should do it. So now you got the Russian group being built. You got the Chinese group being built. And the Russia and China are working together with their militaries for a joint invasion force. They've been practicing in China. Did you know that? Why do you think the Chinese are building those little hopping islands where they can hop from one island to the next and on their way to invade North America? Before they take Pearl Harbor, before they take Hawaii. The Chinese have every design to take Hawaii. When they attack, they will take Hawaii. They will use the islands that they're building now in the Chinese seas, wherever they're building them there, so that they can make their trek to North America for invasion. And Russia will be helping them because China and Russia has never been an enemy with one another. They've always been friends. Never a time when they were seriously going to go to war with each other. That's all for the stupid American people put forward by the Roman Catholic Pope's press here to keep us like mushrooms in the dark and in poop. Then, not to mention that, we're going to have Mexico, where much of our manufacturing base has gone to, because you see, they need that as a springboard. Mexico will be a springboard for invasion into North America. And in conjunction with Mexico, we're going to have Cuba as a springboard nation for invasion, because that port, that deep water port there in Cuba, that naval port, is going to be given to Cuba. The lease expires in, 99 years. It's going to go to Cuba. Guantanamo is going to be in the hands of the Russians and the Chinese. It's a beautiful deep water port. And from there, as they ferry over the Muslims from Africa, they will land them there and then ferry them into Miami, into the South, and they will begin the mass murder of the apostate Christian people of the South. Exactly as the Muslims were used to destroy the apostate Orthodox Christians of Constantinople, of the apostate Christians in Turkey, of the apostate Christians in Arabia, of the apostate Christians in North Africa, even of the apostate Christians in Spain. Even so, Islam, the sword of the church, will be used to destroy apostate Protestant and Baptist Christianity in North America. And how are they going to get here? They're going to get here by Chinese merchant fleets. The Chinese overseas shipping service, which is a part of the Chinese Navy. They already have a deal to bring these Muslims over from Mauritania and Somalia there on the west coast of Africa. The Chinese already have a couple of big ports there. And when the Mecca and Medina are blown up, and that blowing up of those Muslim holy sites, quote unquote, will be blamed on America, the Muslims will frantically cross Africa, do whatever they can to invade the great Satan, America, as the Jesuits want. The Jesuits will use millions of them for our invasion. And to do that successfully, they have to get the guns. So all the Roman Catholic congressmen and senators can continue to advocate gun confiscation along with their Masonic Jewish counterparts so that there will be a successful invasion, because the population has to be disarmed. Now do you understand the real purpose of gun confiscation? Gun control? Yeah, gun control. So that's Islam, Russia, and China. And by the way, U.S. and Canada are on the hit list. The last vestige of the Reformation in the world is the United States and Canada, to the exclusion, of course, of Quebec, fanatical Roman Catholic Quebec. So that's what their design is going to be. That's what their design is. Now, before this huge, what I call in my book, the Sino-Soviet Muslim invasion, before this huge invasion can take place, there has to be the completion of the Panama Canal, now in building. And in the providence of God, I sat down with a white man on a plane several months ago, about a year ago maybe, and he was an engineer at the new Panama Canal. He showed me all the pictures of the new canal, all the concrete pours, the walls, everything. He said the concrete work was pretty lousy, lots of honeycomb, not a very good job. But nonetheless, he showed me pictures. And he said the canal will be done about 217, between 217 and 218. And the canal can bring through the largest aircraft carriers. And in addition to that, they're going to build a canal in Nicaragua, through Nicaragua. So the Chinese will have two big canals that they can bring their navy through into the Gulf of Mexico and probably up to Charleston. Charleston's going to be invaded. And by the way, for those of you blacks that are listening, I just want you to know that if you think the white Protestant and Baptist has persecuted you, has been a racist against you, which is simply not true, you're going to see what racism's all about when the Chinese get here. You're going to see what racism, hatefully anti-black racism is when the Chinese and the Japanese and the Koreans get here. You ain't seen nothing. And they're going to kill you by the millions after they torture you, delightfully torture you, because they hate you. The black American male has the most despicable reputation in the Far East because of all the rape and pillage and plunder he's done when they were in the American military. And those Chinese and those Koreans and those Japanese remember. And when they arrive here, it's going to be payback time. So if you black men have any brains, you need to start siding with us white Protestants and white Baptists, because we're your best friends you ever had. But I don't think so. You continue to hate us. You continue to be agitated against us. You'll follow your Sharptons and your Farrakhans. That's right. And you know what they're going to do? Farrakhan and Sharpton and the others, if they're still alive, they'll be off in Paris somewhere with some white whore. They're not going to be sticking around watching their black brothers getting mass murdered, raped, killed, plundered. They'll be off somewhere else living on their fortune. The Russians hate the blacks too. Wait till they get here. So it's going to be payback time for all the black on white crime, all the black on white racism. God's going to use these savages from the Muslim lands, Russia and China, to make this payback. Unless there is repentance among black men in this country and an utter repudiation of the black Democratic Party setting you up for your destruction. Because before the invaders come, we're going to have our fascism. Fascism in this country has been groomed for the last 80 years. White men have been so persecuted and beaten down and discriminated against in favor of blacks and in favor of the feminists and in favor of the homosexuals and in favor of the Muslims and in favor of you name it. And the Jews, the majority of Jews have sided on this fanatical leftist side, rather than siding with the Protestants and the Baptists, which have been the best friend of the racial Hebrew Jewish Israelites in their history during the diaspora. And when the fascists finally come to power, when the white men rush into the fascist new right, the concentration camps will be thrown open and the roundups will begin. And our military dictator that I've always said is going to be some white man, there's going to be some Protestant, there's going to be some Mason, and Donald Trump fits the bill. He's not a fascist yet, but I'm telling you, he's gaining the confidence of the American people, particularly the white people. And what is fascism? The unification of big business with government. Is that not what we have now? That's fascism. It's not killing anybody yet, but it's fascism. The fascists come to power, and guess what? The fascists also persecute Bible-believing Christians. They shut down every Bible-believing church in Germany during the Third Reich. They called them enemies of the state. So that means Brother Eric's going to be deemed an enemy of the state. Fascism takes over. And fascism is always designed to lose, because fascism openly persecutes the Jews. Remember, there's 7 million Jews at least that are going to be killed between Canada and the United States during the fascist military dictatorship that's coming, which will invoke the curse of the Abrahamic covenant on America and Canada, which will then cause in the loss of our war with China and Russia and whatever, because we're going to have 2 front wars, 3 front wars that we can only lose. And then the invaders will come in. The fascists will be overthrown. The millions and millions that have perished in the camps, their blood will be avenged by the invaders. God is going to orchestrate all of this in North America. And you know why? Because we have departed from the Reformation Bible. We have united with the state with 501c3 status, and we have become sureties for these debtor, all caps. And we will not repent. Isn't that right, white man? Aren't we busy off celebrating the Mary Mass of Christ, that Roman Catholic festival? And now we're going to be celebrating the New Year's Eve, another Roman Catholic festival, New Year's Day devised by the Jesuit Christopher Clavius. I mean, aren't we completely Jesuitized? And when the branches don't bear any more fruit, they're broken off the vine, which is Jesus Christ, and they're gathered by men, the Muslims, the Russians, and the Chinese, and whoever else, and we're brought together in the concentration camps to be burned. John chapter 15. That's what's coming here. Be not deceived. God is not mocked. For whatsoever man soweth, that shall he also reap. Is it not time we began to sow righteousness? White men? Is it not time we began to sow returning to the Reformation Bible? I mean, God can send a great awakening like he did with Josiah. He can send a great awakening and a movement of God like he did with Hezekiah. The Assyrians surrounded Jerusalem, and Hezekiah cried out to the Lord. And Isaiah said, I'm going to deliver this, thus saith the Lord, I'm going to deliver Jerusalem. Lord can do it here. Lord set back the Spanish Armada in 1588. He can set back the Chinese Armada that's coming here. If we would but repent and truly believe that Christ died for our sins, was buried and rose again, and begin to serve him according to his Reformation Bible, separate from the state, no more 501c3 churches, and cease to be sureties for these debtors and return to real American citizenship before March 9th, 1933. We can do it. It's my prayer that we shall. By God's grace, he would intervene for us. I trust he will. That's my goal for 2017. May the Lord set this goal with his men against the Jesuit goal for utter destruction of the Reformation and the bringing about a world government, which is the design of the order for 2017. May God...
Let's tell these Christians and others about Mr. Trump and why he's not the answer.
Well, first of all, who is Donald Trump? I mean, who is he? He's a multi-billionaire, which tells you that he's in with the Roman hierarchy, because you cannot be a billionaire in this country and not be in some way or some manner connected to the white power structure that is run by the Pope through his American Roman hierarchy and overseen by the Jesuits of this country. Furthermore, he's went bankrupt a couple times, and he now has got his fortune back. And see, that doesn't happen unless you have credit or you have ins with the big bankers in New York City, which he does. So Donald Trump is connected with the big bankers of New York City, the big bankers that are Knights of Malta, and other knights that are loyal to the Archbishop of New York City. Because New York City is run by the Archbishop of New York City, Timothy Cardinal Dolan. He's the Archbishop of the political capital of the world. He controls the banks, he controls the politics, he controls the political parties, he controls the mafia, he controls everything in New York City. Just like the Archbishop of Washington, D.C. controls everything in D.C. And you have a Jesuit university in New York called Fordham, and you have a Jesuit university in Washington, D.C. called Georgetown. And between these two Jesuit institutions, overseeing the Archbishop of each city, they run everything. You got a Federal Reserve Bank in Richmond, which is not far from Washington, D.C. You got a Federal Reserve Bank in New York. And the Archbishop controls everything in that Federal Reserve Bank, including all the gold in it. So Trump is part of that. Furthermore, as we mentioned previously, he idolizes Louis XIV.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how his 66th floor was modeled. I have breakup on your end, it's not my end, so I just want you to know that. On the 66th floor of his skyscraper in New York City, and it was all modeled after Louis XIV's Versailles. $100 million worth. So Donald Trump is a man with connections. He's a man of power. He is in with all the high knights. He is a high-level 33rd degree Freemason. He is an apostate Presbyterian. Donald Trump, I believe, is being paid probably no less than $100 million to give it the appearance that he's having a campaign for presidency. And I maintain the reason he's doing this is to ensure a Hillary Clinton victory. I'm convinced he will be given the nomination at the Republican convention, and that will make a shoe-in for Hillary. In the meantime, from what you say, I understand the outlaw motorcycle gangs, the big dope pushers for the CIA, the mafia, have united to defend Donald Trump wherever he speaks.
That's correct.
Well, this is just another evidence of his connections and his power as it relates to the mafia, CIA, FBI, all the motorcycle gangs, the dope trade that the CIA runs, etc., etc. So he's part of this. So he is no way a conservative. He's a banking lover, fractional reserve banking lover, pretended conservative when in fact he's most assuredly a cartel capitalist that works in conjunction with the socialists. Cartel capitalism always works in conjunction with socialism, socialist communism or socialist fascism. You do not have these systems imposed upon a people when you do not have monopolistic cartel capitalism, as we have here in this country. So, as far as I see, Donald Trump is just another one of their minions, like Ted Cruz, like Hillary Clinton, and so on. And whoever they put in the Andrew White House, Jesuit Andrew White House, in the next several months will be the choice of the high Jesuits here. As you know, there is no legitimate voting on a federal level for the president or for really a senator. And so it's all voter fraud, and they control it all, and they put in who they want. So
Yeah.
that's Donald Trump. And Hillary Clinton, if she's put in, I'm sure Bill will be just as much president as he was before. So
Yeah, he'll be our first lady vice president. But would you address the whole Louis XIV and the French Huguenots and what happened there, and why would Trump even model himself after such a wicked sinner?
Well, in reviewing the history of the Huguenots, they were the French Protestant Calvinists.
Mm-hmm.
These Huguenots became very prosperous in business. They were shippers, they were manufacturers. They were the epic population of France. And when we have the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685, that is when Jesuit Pierre Lachaise convinced Louis XIV to withdraw the religious liberty of the Huguenots with the revocation of this Edict of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes was given in 1610 by the king at the time, the king of France. What was he? Louis XIV, I believe. Henry IV. And this guaranteed religious liberty to the French Protestants. Well, 75 years later, in 1685, we have the revocation of this edict and persecution of the French Huguenots. 500,000 of them will be killed. 500,000 will be driven out of the country. And France will be the poorer for it, as what the Jesuits did through Louis XIV. Louis XIV was the one who built the Castle of Versailles in Paris. The one who oversaw the building of it, his name was Colbert. Colbert was a very powerful French Knight of Malta. So the Knights of Malta built Versailles with the benefit of Louis XIV, who was also a knight. He was a protector of them. So Donald Trump is in with that kind of ilk. And so I maintain that if they put him in or Hillary in, they're going to get what they want. They control both horses of the race.
Yeah, it seems like they'll get the race war too. Trump almost seems like he's there for the race war. The fury that's coming from both sides, it's at an all-time level, wouldn't you agree?
Oh yeah. They have trumped up these charges of racist and bigot against Trump because he simply wants to stop the alien invasion of the Hispanics into the country, which should have been done 30 years ago with Reagan. He's right. We either have a country or we don't. I guarantee you, if you go into Mexico without a visa, you're going to jail.
That's right.
And so there's no other country that allows this massive invasion of people coming in illegally. But the Jesuits want this because this is part of their North American Union. They have to bring in as many Hispanic, Roman Catholic, alien invaders that hate white people as possible, bringing their culture, their language, their hatred for the gringo, and they bring it all up in here to further weaken the white people of North America, and particularly the white Protestants and the Baptists. That's what the game really is.
Seems just like Germany, doesn't it? It seems like they're trying to drive us right into right-wing fascism.
Of course. And if it wasn't for the Bible and if it wasn't for the Word of God, I would be a fascist. Of course I would. Any white man in his right mind who doesn't believe the Bible would be a fascist. This is a struggle for our very existence. We are going to be destroyed in the 21st century. By 2050, America will not be a white nation. And when there's no white people that are in a majority, particularly Protestants and Baptists, you're going to have savagery, as you have in every other Hispanic nation, as you have in every other black nation in Africa. You have savagery. You have savagery in Zimbabwe right now because they killed off all the white people. And Zimbabwe was a beautiful country when whites ruled it. They had food to eat. They had the best food in Africa. But now, because those evil, wicked white people who believed in apartheid, well, now we got to kill them all. So we bring in Robert Mugabe, a Jesuit-trained black savage military dictator, and he facilitates the murder of tens of thousands of white people who never did anything wrong except for being white. Okay? This is called the genocide in Zimbabwe right now. White genocide. We have the same white genocide going on in South Africa right now. With that savage Zulu president of South Africa, Zuma, and his control of the savage African National Congress, they're killing the white Boers by the tens of thousands. And other white people too. They're killing all the farmers out of South Africa. And what's going to happen when that takes place? Why, all the blacks are going to starve to death. And many of those blacks are black Protestant Christians. So they're killing off the white Protestant Christians in South Africa so they can starve to death the black Protestant Christians. You see?
Yeah.
But they hide behind the whole race card because they don't want you to see the real issues here. So we have white genocide, white Protestant genocide in South Africa. We have white Protestant genocide in Rhodesia. That's what it really is. It's not Zimbabwe, it's Rhodesia.
Right.
It's built into a beautiful nation under the name of Rhodesia.
And it wasn't stolen from the Zulus either.
It wasn't stolen from the Zulus. I cover it on my website. The Boers purchased all land that they had from the Zulus.
That's right.
And the Zulus drew first blood. They killed the leader of the Boers. So the Boers went to war with them, killed, 10 or 15,000 of them on, Red River, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
So then the Zulus hired the Boers to fight against their enemies. And the Boers, being great white Protestant soldiers, defeated the enemies of the Zulus. And so the Zulus gave them land. They purchased everything, from the Orange Free State to the Transvaal. All of it was purchased from the Zulus. And by the way, there would be no white people in South Africa or in Rhodesia had not the Roman Catholic Church persecuted us and driven us out of Europe. So all these blacks that are hot at the whites say, you need to get hot at the Roman Catholic Church, because they're the ones that are the ones responsible for driving the whites into Africa. But oh no, you won't hear any blacks going after the Roman Catholic Church, except maybe the late Khalid Muhammad. But none of the other ones will touch them because they're all Tobies for the Pope.
It's interesting, though, that ISIS says that their main goal is to destroy the Vatican. I find that interesting.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
that's open but false policy.
Yeah.
If ISIS really wanted to destroy the Vatican, they would cease to exist. Now, as I said before, the leaders of ISIS all have bank accounts in Switzerland with UBS set up by the CIA. That is a fact. The Catholics in action, the CIA. So ISIS is a creation of the CIA.
That's right.
And so the Vatican controlling the CIA wants to kill Christians. They want to kill non-Roman Catholic Christians. They want to kill Coptic Christians. They want to kill them. They want to slaughter them. But they're using what appears to be an open Muslim faction to do it. ISIS. So, and ISIS, of course, is named after the goddess Isis, whose name in Romanism is the Virgin Mary.
Yep.
So, that's what's really happened.
Yeah, the mystery schools, yeah.
And like I said, here in North America, we have the continual destruction of the white-raced peoples, particularly Protestants and Baptists. They're destroying the historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant and Baptist middle class. The only reason why you have a black middle class or a Hispanic middle class or a Catholic middle class is because of the white Roman, white Protestant and Baptist middle class that created the government and created the economic system that we once had that produced true wealth and a middle class.
You know what? I'm glad you brought this up. I see a lot of these black people who join Islam, and they don't know the true history of Islam. It ain't like James Cook and these men just got off a ship and went and just rounded up slaves. It was the black Muslims who rounded up these slaves and sold them into captivity.
Well, the vast majority of blacks in America hate white people. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm 62 years old. I know what I'm talking about. I lived here my whole life. There is no black community I can go in and be welcomed and say, "Hi, how you doing? Well, come to my restaurants." They hate us. And so what they do is they continue to stoke this hate with this horrible lying history that all white men ever did was go to roots. We're going to have roots here with that racist, what's her name? That woman that became a multi-millionaire from white people watching her program. What's her name? You know her name.
Oh, Oprah?
Oprah. That racist. That bigot. So she becomes a multimillionaire because of all these white people, white women watching her program, and then she plays a part in that racist program called Roots with that other racist black man in there. His name is, what's his name?
Denzel?
No, the other guy.
Yeah.
That filthy mouth black actor.
Morgan Freeman.
What's his name?
Was it Morgan Freeman?
No, not Freeman. It's the other guy.
It's the other one.
He was with Mel Gibson in one of his movies.
Danny Glover. Yeah.
Danny Glover. Every other word is MF, 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 MF.
They're remaking that movie.
Glover is a racist. He hates white people.
Mm-hmm.
And so they get all these black racists in this movie, Roots, to portray what they think is true history. And it's not true history.
They're remaking it. It's supposed to be airing this Sunday on the History Channel, the new version.
So all the blacks can be given another shot of hatred for the white man. Just like that other movie, Django, whatever it was.
Yeah, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, we're going to teach more hatred for the white man. And they'll get that Italian Roman Catholic to play the leading part of that vicious white man. What's his name? Oh, you know his name.
Yeah.
He's in many movies.
Yeah, Leonardo.
Leonardo DiCaprio. Get that American Roman Catholic there so we can play that part there. So the Catholics can stoke all the black on white hatred here in America and just keep stoking it and stoking it and stoking it, while the poor blacks are too dumb to understand that they were very well off here. They weren't beaten, and they weren't raped generally. That's all lies. Yep. All the rape was going on in the north. It wasn't going on in the South where there was 7% of the white men down there were slave owners.
That's it. That's right.
But the white Southerners were not slave owners, and then they got to portray the Confederate flag as nothing but a racist, hate the black man flag, when the Confederate flag was a flag that denoted states' rights and sovereignty and wanting to separate from this Yankee North and wanted to centralize power everywhere. The Confederate flag is a beautiful flag, but the Jesuits with their Ku Klux Klan will have the Ku Klux Klan take that flag and fly it everywhere like it's some sort of anti-black, hatefully racist flag. And so then all the blacks fall for that nonsense because they're too lazy, that's right, I said lazy, to do their own research and investigation. They just rather watch the TV and be told what to believe. Just like the majority of white people.
That's right.
And going on, I'm on a roll here, so I might as well finish it.
I love
What
it.
else here? So we have that, we have... and any black man who comes out and says, wait a second, the South, there were 60 to 100,000 blacks that were on the side of the Confederacy. Don't make it all white. If a black man comes out and says that, why, he's an Oreo cookie. He's black on the white side, not white, black on the outside, white on the inside. He's nothing but an Uncle Tom. And see, if you don't hate white people, you're an Uncle Tom. And that's part of the stoking of the hatred that's necessary to incite a race war.
Let me ask you
And
this.
it's going to come just as sure as it's coming because the preachers in this country have not exposed this plot of the Jesuit order controlling the black leaders and the white leaders through Freemasonry.
Now, how many...
Controlling the black nation of Islam with the white Ku Klux Klan, with that white devil Billy Graham, and all these other whoremasters working for the Pope, facilitating a race war. And there's only one thing worse than a race war. That's called a holy war. Only because it's killing of men, women, children, indiscriminately, wipe them out. And that's a holy war and a race war. If you want to read about race war, just go read about the Mau Mau uprising in Africa in 1950 in Kenya. Read about it. The average person knows nothing of the Mau Mau uprising in 1950. There was a movie called Mau Mau, I believe, and Sidney Poitier played the leading Mau Mau in it. People need to watch that movie. It was made in the 1970s or 60s. Watch it. Of course, Sidney Poitier is a Knight of the Equestrian Order and most fanatical Roman Catholic. So he's the perfect guy to create sympathy for the Mau Mau. So it's the continual brainwash of the blacks to hate the whites so that the whites are desperate and so they can be driven to right-wing fascism. And I'll tell you this. There's never been a time in history where whites and blacks have gone to war and the blacks have won. Never. And it's not going to happen here. They're cutting their own throats if they start a race war. And that's exactly what the black leaders want because they're all working for the Masonic Lodge and the Pope of Rome. They want a race war. Louis Farrakhan has admitted this to an individual I know. He says his purpose is to incite a civil war. That's why he calls white people white bastards. That's why he incites blacks to hate white people and calling for genocide. So it's going to continue, and the white people are going to be more and more desperate. And so when the guy comes along on the white horse, they'll all follow him. And then, because of these last 80 years of black on white crime, vengeance is going to unfold in the most bloody, horrible way possible. All these white men that have had their mothers raped, or their daughters raped, or their sisters raped, or killed, or their sons killed, all that anger is going to come boiling to the top, and it's going to be an absolute decimation. That's what's coming. And I hope it doesn't. One of my purposes of my ministry is to prevent this from happening. And that's why I call for racial separation into nationhood. That's why white people need their own country that are Protestant and Baptist. That's why I want to start my own country somewhere here in North America, beginning in Pennsylvania with some county. Doesn't have to be Lebanon, it can be some other county, but we need our own nation because there's going to be a race war. The blacks, they have their own county in Philadelphia. It's called Chester County. It's entirely black for the most part, and that's good. They need their own county. We need to racially separate because whenever you forcefully miscegenate, God sends a race war. He sends a race war, a destruction of the culture, poverty, because he created the races to be sustained and to keep mankind separate. And he's against race mixing. He's against miscegenation. He created the races to keep mankind separate.
Amen.
Huh? Protestants, historic Protestants, have always practiced racial separation. It's the Roman Catholics who have all miscegenated. Roman Catholic Brazil miscegenated. Roman Catholic South America miscegenated. But not in the historic northern white Protestant North America until the last 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
When we've been under forced miscegenation, forced race mixing, forced integration that has wrecked the military, it's wrecked our culture, it's wrecked our school system. You can't possibly go to school and want to learn anything if you got to be considered who's going to beat my butt after class. Some bad black dude's going to beat me up. How can you possibly concentrate and learn anything? So that's what we have. All throughout this entire country.
I had a thought.
Stop.
I got to ask you this. You mentioned something. I want to address this. You would know the answer to this. How many blacks helped dig the trenches in Atlanta during the Civil War?
Most of them. Most of them, because
wasn't it
but you talk to a
60,000?
typical black down in Atlanta. Oh, they built the trenches because they had to.
No, they were
didn't.
pretty.
These blacks in Atlanta knew that the Yankee banditti, which for many of them were Irish Catholics, were taking their women and their little girls and gang raping them.
Mm-hmm.
And so these black men in Atlanta said, we don't want that happening to our women. And they dug the trenches hard. And then they also took their little girls and their wives into the swamps and wanted to protect them and hide them there from their Yankee rapists. So no, that's all nonsense. And if you watch Gone with the Wind, you see the blacks down there. They say, we had enough of these Yankees. They're right.